We're going to start by a conversation with one of our celebrated sons, Kofi Annan. I think everybody knows Kofi. I don't need to say much about him. But no doubt he's one of those Africans who are out there in the world stage. And that in itself must be very inspiring for a lot of our people in Africa to see one of our boys up there in the United Battery fighting it out in the UN. He has been through a lot, and I think would like to listen and understand a few things about that turbulent 10 years he's been there and what happened afterward. It is an absolutely frank discussion, and we hope to have room for questions afterwards. We're going to be politically incorrect, as usual. So, Kofi, without too much ado, please join me. Right, let me get my questions here. I had to be very careful what to ask you. And, well, first, thank you for joining us. You have been always part of what you're doing. You chaired our prize committee for 4 or 5 years. Immediately after I came from office, we're grateful for that. You have been engaged in Africa all the time. And we really need to have a free flowing conversation. And you served as 10 years in the UN as Secretary General, but actually you spent almost all your life in the United Nations. You came through the ranks. You were in WHO, you were in management, you were in human resources, peacekeeping. You're one of the commissions as well for refugees, was it?
Yes.
So you've seen the underbelly of United Nations. Yeah. What do you make of it? I mean, this huge organization. You're the first Secretary General to rise through the ranks to be a Secretary General. What is your take about this huge?
Yeah. No, it's a huge organization. And there are many aspects of the UN that sometimes escapes the outside world or the public, and even those of us who worked in the system. Because of the organization, the way it's structured in its agencies, we ourselves didn't know everything. And as you said, I had the chance to move from one organization to the other, and that really gave me a good understanding of the organization. And in fact, I was talking to someone this morning who said that she had picked up that some of the governments are telling the UN agencies that you have to compete to get our resources. And I said, I used to say, you have to perform as one, that you must all cooperate and deliver as one. But when I started with the international system, I had no idea that I was going to stay for this long. I thought I was going to do it for 2-3 years and move on. It became a lifetime preoccupation. But the real challenge came when I moved into peacekeeping. And that was also the time peacekeeping exploded.
Yes.
It exploded from Yugoslavia to Rwanda to Somalia.
You almost had the world's 4th or 5th largest army?
I think we had the peacekeeping was much bigger than most armies. And our difficulty was we didn't have a standing army. It was when the crisis broke that we went to governments begging them to give us troops. So I used to say in New York, the way we ran the peacekeeping operation, it was like telling the mayor of London or New York or Marrakech that we know fire breaks out sometimes, but when the fire breaks out, we'll build a firehouse for you.
We recruit the fire workers and train them.
And usually it becomes a real challenge. If you don't get the troops, you can't do much. Peacekeeping deserves well-trained soldiers, but you don't always get them. The governments with the well-trained soldiers today don't really participate in peacekeeping. Lots of other countries have made sacrifices and continue to stand by the UN. And then, of course, I became Secretary General, and that story you know.
Yes. One question. I mean, we're all puzzled about the reform of UN. Mm-hmm. One of your legacies in UN was to produce that report mm-hmm. about reform of the United Nations just before he left office. Mm-hmm. This must be like 10 years ago?
More than 10 years ago.
Now, we haven't seen any reform. What's going on there?
UN is very complicated. It's very difficult to reform. In fact, some people compare it to the Vatican, that they have deep roots, deep interest, and it's always very difficult to reform. I did produce, even before the last one in 2005, one of the things I tackled when I became Secretary General was to produce a comprehensive program of reform. And I recall 6 weeks after the report came out, somebody managed to get a piece in the New York Times complaining that I had not reformed the UN in 6 weeks flat. And that day I was going to have...
Like Trump.
That day I was going to have lunch with the Security Council. So I started my remarks to the Council by apologizing for my failure to reform the UN in 6 weeks. And one of the ambassadors, Sergei Lavrov, who is today the Russian foreign minister, Sergei said, "Mr. Secretary General, what are you complaining about? You've had more time than God had in creating the world." So I said, "Mr. Ambassador, you are right, but God had a unique advantage.
Yeah.
He worked alone." Without the Security Council. So it is very complex, particularly when you take issue like the reform of the Security Council. The bulk of the last proposal I made focused on reforming the Security Council. The structure of the Council today is based on the geopolitical realities of
Second World War.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And the world has changed. We have to move and adapt with it, and that's not happening. And I think at that time, I realized that you cannot ask the permanent members to give up the veto power. They will not. So we wanted to create additional permanent seats without veto powers to bring in additional members from the other regions to make the council more democratic and more representative. We had very good discussions. At one stage, I thought we were very close. Take the African region. The proposal was Africa should have 2 permanent seats, but we had 3 candidates. The moment we said 2 seats, Egypt said, great, 1 for Africa south of the Sahara and 1 for Africa north of the Sahara. And you knew which country was going to get the one for north of the Sahara. So the competition started. And Nigeria and South Africa said, no, Africa is Africa. Let's compete, and may the best region win. Pakistan looked at India. We will not stand by and let in, because so there was competition amongst them, and the permanent members themselves, some paid lip service, but were not really serious about it. But I believe if we do not reform the council, over time it will lose its influence and legitimacy.
Yes.
It's already in trouble. We can get to a situation where the emerging countries, whether it's India, Indonesia, South Africa, or this, will ask, why do we have to accept decisions by this board, this body that is not representative? So the permanent members and the big boys have to think through very carefully and decide how much power they want to give up to make the participation of the others meaningful so that you get cooperation. Otherwise, we will get into a situation of destructive competition, and they will question the primacy of the council.
But this is a major problem for us when we see almost the collapse of the world order, and we see Security Council, which is most of the time is unable to make decisions, is enough for one of the 2 or 3 countries there to just veto what they don't like. We see Security Council unable to act in Syria, unable to act in many other places. And people look at that and say, where is this world government?
Yeah.
And
I think the intention of the charter has been distorted in a way, in application, in my judgment, by the permanent members. They should see the Security Council as if it were the executive committee of our collective defense mechanism, that they work on behalf of everybody. But over the years, they've tended to look at national interest. If they were to really look at it in terms of we are acting on behalf of the whole world, not for my specific country or the interest of my country, the attitude would be different.
Yes.
I mean, today we are seeing through what is happening on Syria, for example.
Yeah.
Over the years, they've not been able to come to a real agreement on Syria. And today we have the debate on the use of the chemical weapons. And this is happening at a time when you need the US and Russia to work together with other countries to resolve the Syrian conflict. As long as they are at each other and at loggerheads, we are not going to make real progress.
Well, famously, you were asked to mediate in Syria, and after a few months, you just gave up. At first time, I see you, after, just throw the towel and said, guys, I cannot work.
Absolutely, and I was happy I did that. It was very difficult, it was hard, because I felt for the Syrians and the destruction taking place. But I concluded that those who gave me the job were not as serious as I thought they were. The mediator cannot want peace more than the protagonist, more than the Security Council that gave him the job. We met in Geneva, and on the 12th of June, 2012, we came up with a communique which everyone signed. Lavrov, Fabius, Hillary Clinton, and they were to go to New York and build on it and work together to resolve the Syrian issue. And really, I thought the only way you can resolve the Syrian issue, if all the protagonists came to the conclusion, which they should have a long time ago, that there's going to be no winner and it's going to be destructive for all, and that they should come together, agree a common framework, and resolve it. This is what happened in 1648, after the 30-year war, when the Europeans got together and we got the Treaty of Westphalia. We got a treaty where they all said, let's stop this killing and agree. They need their moment in Syria, but the parties that gave me the job were not ready for it. So I decided if they are not going to follow up on decisions they take in Geneva 2 weeks later, which would have given us a way forward, then they were not serious.
It's better to put the blame where the blame lies. And among the things you have done there, which was a little bit unusual, you started the Global Compact, brought business to the room, because UN always was really government bodies, and you now brought the business to the room. You started the Global Fund,
Yeah.
You must be very proud of Global Fund because it's going stronger and stronger, and
Yeah.
you are all aware about the Global Fund and how much that is. That must be very. But I think one very interesting that the issue raised in the Millennium when you came up with the idea of the MDGs,
Yes.
the Millennium Development Goal, and you started your report with "We are the people." This is very strange language. I mean, you are sitting in New York and the UN guys, and they say, "We are the people."
Yeah.
What made you make such a statement?
No, I think I have quite a lot of my UN colleagues here, very senior people who worked with me I see Mary Robinson, Mark Malloch-Brown, Jean-Marie Guéhenno, and there are lots of others that I don't want to miss. But one of the things I had to do when I took over as Secretary General was really think through and work with the colleagues of asking the question, what can the UN do? And what should the UN do? What can the UN do alone? What should the UN do with others? And what should the UN leave others to do? And once you go through that process, you conclude very quickly that there's no way you're going to handle the problems on your own. You need partners. The private sector and business had experience, capacity, management, and innovation that could be useful. Civil society also came in and we teamed up with them. So really, I decided we should open up the organization. And in fact, some ambassadors, even on Global Compact, asked me, Mr. Secretary General, who gave you the authority to open up this organization and bring in the civil society and private sector? So I said, Mr. Ambassador, look at your charter. It begins with we, the peoples. And the peoples are out there. They are not in this building. And we need to reach out and create a situation where they can also come to us. And I think our work with civil society and the private sector expanded, and really today we work UN works very closely.
We following in your steps, and we started a conversation with UN and the global. Later on, we'll bring civil society. Bono will have conversation with the campaigners, and we'll end our conversation with the business people. We'll bring one of the eminent business people here, Paul Polman. I don't know if he's in the room.
I see Paul there.
Yeah, and because I think all those people should be in the room.
Yeah.
That's really important. And now, please.
No, I was going to say there are lots of things that, as I said, the UN couldn't do alone. We need that partnership with a private sector. And also, in fact, when we came up with Global Compact, the civil society thought we should have been able to enforce the 10 principles in areas of human rights, core labor standards, the environment, and the fight against corruption. But the UN didn't have the authority to impose that on them. And the companies embraced it. And I thought transparency was going to be a powerful tool. Quite a few of them were reporting to their board and their workers. So if you say you did something that you didn't do, your own workers knew, the competition knew. And so the openness and the willingness for the companies to do it was important. And it was also good for business. Doing good was good for business. A company didn't have to pollute the lake that produced fresh water for the villagers. A company didn't have to wait for a law by government to pay a decent wage, and so forth. So they could themselves take the lead in some of these areas.
I think maybe, Paul, you should invite Kofi to join your B team, your business group or something. I mean, it's giving you good ideas. Let us move now to Africa. It's time to focus on our own little things. One of the big arguments in Africa here, which you actually raised your voice about, was the issue of the International Criminal Court.
Yes.
And I don't understand why our brothers in Addis in that exclusive club called the African Union, are so mad at ICC.
Yeah.
You have been part of that debate and that makeup. Can I just take your, to have your take on this? What's going on?
Yeah, that is rather, well, there are several issues. First of all, when we set up the ICC, in my statement in Rome, I said the eyes of the victims are firmly fixed on us.
Yeah.
And it is the victims we should be worried about. Yes, there are lots of African cases at the ICC, but most of these cases were referred to the ICC by the African governments themselves. Why did they do it? Because they didn't have the mechanism in Africa to put them on trial.
Yeah.
I mean, I was involved in the Kenyan crisis in 2007, 2008. 1,300 people were killed. 650,000 people were uprooted from their homes, became displaced. Who speaks for them? We hear a lot about don't touch the leaders, and they travel the world resisting the ICC.
Darfur, we have 300,000 people died in Darfur. Any justice?
You don't hear about, and yet when I travel around Africa, Africans want justice, if possible from their own cause. But if it doesn't exist, they will take it from ICC or whichever institution will give them justice. I think it was a shame to see the African leaders almost form a trade union to protect themselves without thinking of the concerns of the poor and the weak. Yeah. You know, if they had also been concerned about the victims, I think I would have listened to them a bit more.
Actually, we have today our sister, Fatou Bensouda, who is the ICC prosecutor. Please, can you stand up? Can you please give her a hand? We need a mic. Can we have a mic to our sister? Fatou, those guys are mad at you. Why?
Indeed, they're mad, but I think this is a very good opportunity for me to be able to interact with so many eminent leaders from the continent. I'm pleased to say that. And also to commend you, Mo, for making this happen. And to your team, I think so far it's fantastic.
Thank you.
And I do believe that the narrative that is out there about Africa, how it is a landmass ridden with wars and conflict and nothing positive happening, we need to reject that, and we need to change this narrative. I do believe that what you're doing is something that can help in that regard.
Thank you.
But coming to the ICC, in 1998, the world came together and created this permanent, independent international criminal court. And I want to highlight something that perhaps many people don't know, and that is the role that Africa has played in creating and establishing the International Criminal Court. Today, in any regional bloc that you have, Africa has the largest number of states that have joined the ICC. 34 states are part of the ICC from Africa alone. And this is something that we should be proud of as Africans. Good. There's nothing to be shameful of that, because we were saying, together with the other voices and other states, we were saying that impunity for atrocity crimes should stop, and that there should be accountability for those who perpetrate these crimes, especially against their own citizens, against their own nationals, that this has to stop. And as I said, Africa played a great role in that, even with the work of the ICC. Given the serious subject matter that we are dealing with, crimes against humanity, war crimes, genocide, even with the work of the ICC, for it to start, and I always commend African states, for it to start, it was actually the African states again that have referred situation. I'm not saying that maybe ICC would not have started work, but if we did not, yes, if they did not come to the ICC to request for the ICC's intervention, perhaps we would not have started work
Who
at the
came to
time we
you?
did.
I know of Uganda. Who else?
Uganda came.
Yeah.
The Democratic Republic of Congo has also referred the situation to the ICC. The Central African Republic, Mali has referred.
Cote d'Ivoire?
Cote d'Ivoire has referred. In fact, Cote d'Ivoire, even before it became a state party, because with respect to those states that are not parties to the Rome Statute, can actually make a declaration and accept the jurisdiction of the court under Article 12. And Cote d'Ivoire did that firstly before becoming a state party and requesting the ICC
So what
to
you're saying is that many African countries came and asked you to
Indeed.
intervene.
Indeed.
And then later complain. You say,
Indeed.
why you are intervening?
Indeed.
Typical African.
Yes.
Yeah. What else? Yeah.
In fact, the last African state that came to the ICC was just last year, Gabon. Gabon is the latest African state that has referred a case to the ICC, bringing the African referrals to 7. In the case of the Central African Republic, on 2 occasions, they have referred situations to the ICC. In fact, currently, I'm investigating into the situation in Central African Republic, as well as other. Libya, for instance, it was not a referral from Libya itself, but a referral from the United Nations Security Council, which is a body that can actually, under the Rome Statute, refer situations to the ICC, perhaps instead of setting up a court themselves, like was done in Rwanda and the former Yugoslavia. They can refer a situation to the ICC. Darfur was also another situation that was referred to the ICC. So this narrative that ICC is going after African leaders has no justification when you look at the reality of the situation. People do not stop to look at how these cases have come to Africa. All they see is that there is a group of people who are trying to protect themselves and forgetting about the victims. Because the raison d'etre...
The good news is that although the government of South Africa tried to withdraw from the ICC, I think the courts in South Africa ruled that that's unconstitutional.
Indeed.
Is that correct? We have South African
correct.
people here?
Yeah.
It's correct, yes.
Indeed,
well, Gambia, your own country.
My own country, yes.
And, but fortunately, you kicked this guy out, and you are still in the ICC. So that's some good news.
These are, these are positive developments that have happened. Of course, last year, around the middle of the year, at the peak of it, there is always this talk about a mass withdrawal by African states from the ICC, which even, if you look at the reality, it was really a few countries, the staunch critics of the ICC, who were talking about this mass withdrawal. But if you go to individual African states, most of them, and they have expressed it now publicly in the last Assembly of States Parties, that they do not intend to withdraw from the ICC. What we should see, what we should understand is that the ICC and the jurisdiction of the ICC is an extension of the domestic jurisdiction.
Exactly.
It is not being imposed on national domestic jurisdictions.
One question, how many African judges you have in your court?
We have had, in the past
7
years,
8?
About 6 or 7.
6 or 7 judges.
Out of the 18 judges.
Out of 18, we had 7 judges.
From Africa.
And we had, well, this lady looks African to me, correct?
Yes.
So those guys complain in Addis that this is a foreign court and Africans are dominant people in that court.
Yeah.
I think it's a bit ridiculous.
I think she says something which should be clarified, that the ICC gets involved where the country concerned either cannot handle the cases or does not want to handle them.
Absolutely.
In the case of Kenya, for example, I offered them 2 opportunities to set up a local tribunal. Grassa is here with me. Grassa was on the panel with me. We offered them 2 opportunities, and the parliament voted down the possibility of setting up a local tribunal. And that's why it went to the ICC. I had an envelope with names, and they said, you give the envelope to the Kenyan court if they set it up, otherwise you send it to ICC.
Thanks, Fatou.
Indeed, I just wanted...
Time.
Yes,
I'm sorry.
just one last thing.
Fatou, you are a judge, but this is not a court. Thanks. Is that not a formidable African? You heard our sister Amina yesterday. I mean, African women are really, amazing.
And small African countries are powerful. You see the two of them, Abdul Ajani and Fatou sitting, both from Gambia.
A very small country, and yes, wonderful.
Handling powerful issues.
And most of our laureates are from small countries too.
Yeah.
We have a lot to learn from those guys. I just one remark I really cannot resist making. I just understand that the African Union decided to create an African court as a replacement for the ICC. That's, of course, a huge cost of money and resources, etc. We said, fine. So I went and asked them, Addis, so what this court exactly is going to do? And I looked at the constitution of this court, and it's not allowed to prosecute presidents or ministers. So I thought, excuse me, but our fishermen, our peasants, our taxi drivers, we can all treat them in the normal courts. Why you have to create another court to treat them? What is the point?
Yeah.
And it is such a ridiculous approach, unfortunately, which really caused us a major problem, because the African Union really should stop acting like an exclusive club of presidents whose only objective is to protect them. Come on, that doesn't work at this time and age.
Yeah, no, you can't. And we should be careful when we talk of politicization, that it doesn't come from the leaders themselves, that you can send opposition members to the court. You can provide information on some, but when it comes to, it gets closer to you, you say, the court stops at the door. You shouldn't come anywhere near me, but you cooperate and send others.
I really haven't gone through half my questions, and it breaks my heart to see the message flashing there that get out of here. Time is done.